Hello, I'm Joseph Napier, Sr., producer of this video that speaks to the history of Youngstown's $1 million playground, IDORA. Here's a picture of East Federal Street, downtown Youngstown, and what it looked about 1897. In the background, you can see one of the trolley cars, and we'll be talking about trolley cars often as we'll be talking about the Youngstown Park and Fall Street Railway Company and how it ferried people from the downtown public square areas it was called then, or Central Square area, take your pick, all the way from downtown area all the way to the south side of Youngstown to what we call the IDORA Amusement Park, the far corner of the south side of Youngstown. Here you see a picture that's welcoming people to the terminal. After the first few years, they built some fancy digs where they would bring people in and swing them around a lagoon. Here you see PARKVIEW entrance picture here as they're being let off and right into the park. There wasn't no fence around the amusement park back then, not in its humble beginnings when it was called Terminal Park. As you see, it was opened on May 30th, 1899. You had a picture house, you had a theater, you had a concert stage, if you will, a circle or swing ride that went around. You had a lot of different things as the park opened. You know, a lot of things were offered to the people there, so it became our playground, adult as well as a kids' playground. Let the season begin. Each and every year you went to IDORA Park, there was a new ride. Or they simply moved the ride around to another spot in the park and maybe even renamed the ride. Here is a bandstand that was up on the hill portion of the park there, up near if you will, the picnic area, where they have outside live performances. A full piece band would be there. Here is our grand ballroom, as you saw there from the signage. Grand indeed. Yes, it was. That grand ballroom was the second ballroom that was built on the grounds of IDORA. That was built in 1910 to be exact. And if you're doing the math, that's 11 years after it opened. The Dips to Dips coaster was the original Jackrabbit. They just simply reconfigured it, called it a different name, and voila, the Jackrabbit. In 1899, the Market Street Bridge would open to traffic. A gentleman by the name of William R. Stewart, an African-American senator, matter of fact, the first African-American senator that held from the great city of Youngstown, Ohio, a state senator. In the background there, you can see the ballpark and Dips to Dips, or what we would normally, let's say, call the Jackrabbit. Here is our saltwater pool. We had to brag about the saltwater pool. It was the only saltwater pool in the whole country. They drilled down 600 feet, bringing the water from the lower water tables up, and thus you had a saltwater pool. It was the only one in the United States. Route 62 would bring people into the back entrance, called it, into the Canfield Road corridor. Here at the Glenwood Avenue corridor, I pay tribute to this street because I grew up on the street in part. I spent half my childhood on Glenwood Avenue. I could walk to IDORA Park, and this is a tribute to my old neighborhood right before I got, it was my neighborhood I lived in when I got out of high school and went into the Army. Matter of fact, thanks Curtis Goldstein for the mural, as you see here in the background. It pays tribute to the IDORA neighborhood. There again, you can see the mural was just grand. Beautiful artwork that endears the community. This is the site of the former IDORA Falls, as the park was named after in its second year. As you can see, it transitioned from the IDORA, IDORA Falls, or park, as a terminal park, into IDORA Park, named after the falls that was originally called IDORA Falls, as you see. And people that live in the area know that that's Lanterman's Mill, and that's the Lanterman's Mill Fall that drapes right beside the grist mill there. I'm coming down PARKVIEW, as you can see there. I'm looking backwards from where I came, and that was right off Glenwood Avenue. Often when I would walk there, like I said, from my home, I would always come in the front entrance, the original entrance. I would come down and make that right on the PARKVIEW, all the way down PARKVIEW, and then into the park. It was every step I took with pure delight as I knew what I was going to experience once I got to the park. And this what I would see. I would cascade right up to the park. In the mid-60s, they started charging admission. Before the mid-60s, you could literally just drive your car up or the trolley, up until the trolley days. Of course, electric buses would come into play after trolleys, and then buses, and then later cars. And as you saw Shelter there, that was a place where people waited on the bus at. I'm doing a full circle here. I'm looking back down on Parkview into Mill Creek Park, which it linked up to Mill Creek Park. Back in the day, the people who came to Idora, once they got off the trolley, they can go into the park, which I said was absolutely free, or you could walk down into Mill Creek Park and sightsee. Mill Creek Park came online some years earlier, of course, in 1899. Terminal Park would come online as well. We're looking at Mill Creek Park start was 1867 or thereabout. You saw right there on the parking lot area. Now I'm looking onto the grounds through the fence. I try to look around and see where rides are. As you can see, Mother Nature has reclaimed the territory very thoroughly, if you will, very sufficiently. It just reclaimed it. You can see some mounts there where there was a waterfall or fountain at one time, rather, and Picnic Hill in the background. I'll spin it around a little bit. I'm just caught up with emotion here because I hadn't came back down into this area in probably 20 years, and to come back down now and see how much the vegetation has taken over, it's just really extraordinary. Really surprised me. Do you remember what Picnic Hill looked like? It was an elevated portion of Idora Park that you went up in a shaded area because you had a lot of foliage up there, and you could eat your picnic lunch. They have pavilions up there and eat, and then you come down into the park, buy your tickets, and then you get on the ride. For those that didn't want to ride, they didn't have to ride. They just people watched, and the kids would often ride the rides, and the big kids would ride the rides as well. A railway patient, like I said earlier, had a choice to go enter the park there, right onto the grounds directly, or they could go down to Mill Creek Park, old Terminal Park, and this would be the Idora Park corridor here, as that's where you would get off. And later on, it would develop the backside, and this is the backside area, looking left to right. It was a gigantic parking lot, actually, 3 to 4 times, in my opinion, bigger than the front original entrance parking lot. You had to go through a toll booth. I think at some point they were charging for parking too, so they were trying to find ways to compete with the state and national amusement parks, so they had to stay competitive. So you come through here, and it was a little white building, and you had to check in there, get your parking stub, pay your money, and come on in. And that was built about 1933, I believe, in that area. If you look off to the right-hand side, which I'm pivoting the opposite direction now, was the baseball field, the famous Idora baseball field. Minor league games were played there, as well as professional league or major league teams would come to Youngstown to scrimmage our minor league teams. Also, the NEGRO League played games at Idora's baseball field as well. The Sons of Thunder football team practices on what used to be the Idora baseball field. If you see the card here to the left, that's where the ball field is. And over there is behind trees, though you couldn't really tell, but on the other side of those trees was the baseball field to the left. I'm taking time to look around because I said, wow, I can't believe so much vegetation has grown in through the trees. So you may see the team practicing as I'm filming on the other side. Idora Park, one of their many advertisements, as you see here, very, very colorful, that pointed you to Idora and let you know how to get there. This was the backside entrance, how it was featured. That was the original Idora sign on the backside. Record hops were commonplace at Idora because they were trying to lure teenagers there so they can get on the rides and buy the concession food, etc., etc. You know, spend that money. That's what it was all about. I always said that this was one of the best ways to see the park from an aerial perspective, if you will. The Jackrabbit came online in 1914. Of course, the Dips was 1910, or the original roller coaster was the Jackrabbit. And later on, they would change the name as they would reconfigure it, make it longer and higher and stuff like that, and it would become the Jackrabbit. Here you go. Come along with me as I go on a ride on the Jackrabbit. Hold on. IDORA helped us get through the Great Depression years. IDORA was unique in that respect, in that it never shut down. It powered right through the Depression. It was so reasonably priced. As you remember, I said earlier, you didn't have to. Here is the beginning. Matter of fact, in 1929, that was the year the Depression started. Building on the WILDCAT began. About 1930, they opened up the WILDCAT to, I'd say, roller coaster enthusiasts, if you will. I didn't go on the roller coaster until I was in the 12th grade myself. I was scared to ride the sucker. I rode on the Jackrabbit all the time, but this ride here, woo! Of course, it was ranked 10 in the country. It was one of the top 10 roller coasters in the country at the time, in the world, actually. A very specialized design. The guy that built that coaster had 100 patents on a lot of other roller coasters. So even up to 1984, the WILDCAT held its place in history as one of the top 10 roller coasters. Here is Lost River. It's a combination of a roller coaster slash water lagoon slash water ride, if you will. In the back, you can see where IDORA'S Limited would leave from the little train that took you all over the park. And you'll see a picture of it in a little bit. That was IDORA'S world famous fries, as I call them, but Youngstown famous fries. Here is a picture of the Caterpillar, which it will envelop you with a tarp over you, and you ride around in the dark. Then the tarp will fold back over. Here's a picture of, here it is, the IDORA Limited or the IDORA Express. Take your pick. IDORA was known to change the name on different rides, so if you thought it was a new ride, it actually wasn't. It just gave it another name. This was Hooterville Highway. It took you around the park in a very special way. You felt like as a kid riding this ride that you could ride a car, you could drive a car. I threw a picture of my license plate in there. I got a 1928 replica of a license plate. I threw that in there. Here's the world famous bumper cars, you know, and here's a fun house where they had featured a lot of mirrors and psychedelic lights and floors that drop out and zigzag rooms and some of everything, black light rooms. Here again is the world's famous Ferris wheel in the background while you got the rockets spinning around. And of course, the fun house, that was the nickname right there, as you see on the front side there of the front of the fun house, as it was later called. But see, like again, like I said, rides were either moved to other locations sometimes, but every year you generally did get another ride or a replacement on a ride at the park. Here's the world's famous, I call it there again, Youngstown famous Midway. This was a building I spent a lot of my time in, hanging out in, the Penny Arcade. I like getting the cards out of the slots of different fancy cars. I always admired cars. Popcorn, anybody? Not this popcorn, it's kind of stale. Thanks to the Bell family. Boots Bell, who was a popular radio personality in the area, WHOT to be exact, was the main man on WHOT at the time. He would let his kids come here and they would run through the park and have fun and play, as well as with a chaperone. And he had a lot of acts that would come to IDORA in the day, like Ray Charles and Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller. I mean, he just had a lot of. Then later, the hot FM days were like, there's my dude there. You would have a lot of acts like David Cassidy, you saw there, the Bay City Rollers, Devo, Blue Oyster Cult, and acts like that. And older acts back in the day, you had the Tommy Dorsey Band, Glenn Miller, Cab Calloway, Ray Charles, like I said earlier, Morgan Ferguson, and acts like that would come. The ballroom was used for a lot of different events. Here we welcome John F. Kennedy to Youngstown, Ohio, as he was running on the Democratic ticket with Lyndon Baines Johnson. He came to IDORA after he left downtown Youngstown, speaking in front of the federal artist Mahoney County Courthouse. he would come to Idora and eat dinner there. There was a luncheon there provided for him as the way to raise campaign funds. Which way to Idora? I would be asked a lot of times when I was walking my street, like I said, growing up on Glenwood. People would often ask me, "Hey kid, which way is it to Idora?" And I would always point them in the right direction. But there were signs that you just saw that they were nailed on the poles, but people often didn't see them. Idora Park guest passes was, you felt like a VIP if you got one of those, because you could literally ride the rides for free on that day, or they had them for a week, or maybe even a month, or maybe even all season long, a season pass. KIDDIELAND is born. KIDDIELAND was built on top of what used to be the Grand Pool, as you remember seeing the saltwater pool, as this is the baby boom days, if you will. And families start exploding, the kids in households 3, 4, 5 deep. So the kiddos needed a place, and they designed KIDDIELAND. They simply filled in the pool with concrete, smoothed it out, and it was like it was never there. And in that section, KIDDIELAND was born. KIDDIELAND offered a lot of rides that would rival, or mimic, if you will, is a better word, mimic the adult Idora Park rides. Here's a picture of the Grand Idora Carousel, way before the fire. We'll get to that later. But it was bought by a couple in Brooklyn when they auctioned it off. These cars here, I remember getting in those. I felt like I was a race car driver for real, and I actually remember sitting inside that train. Here's an advertisement, advertised the human beings. The human beings were from Youngstown. Nobody likes to do a lot of people know that song, but it was the human beings. They were a one-hit wonder, and they were from Youngstown. Here's a sign saying no alcohol, no pets, no readmittance. Once you left the park, for security reasons, you weren't allowed to come back in. Or unless you had a guest pass, and later on you would have passes that would stick on your shirt, and you can go out and maybe come back in, but it was up to the security people. This movie was filmed at Idora Park in part. I remember it well. They held the auditions right down the street from where I lived. 3 houses down I lived from the Playhouse. If you were up the street from the Playhouse, the Youngstown Society for the Blind days, for people that remember the Glenwood corridor in the old days in the IOOF building. I remember seeing cars go down into the audition for that movie. A sad goodbye, as you know. The Back Rabbit marked the last days of Idora Park, I would say, the mid-'80s. As you see here, April 26, 1984, devastation took hold of Idora Park. A fire was started accidentally by a welder doing work on the Lost River ride, which spread onto the WILDCAT and onto concession stands, and jumped from concession stand to concession stand and across the Midway, destroying a good half of the shelters and rides at the park. An auction was held a little bit later in October, if you will, and artifacts were sold off, as you see some of the advertisements there to that effect. The Ballroom's last stand was on March 6, 2001. It would last longer, and it would meet its demise on fire. Somebody got inside the basement and set a fire or something, or vagrants lived in the bottom, the basement of this very grand ballroom, which I was going there into the late 80s myself for different musical acts that they would pull in. We will never forget Youngstown's $1 Million Playground, long as I live. I know I won't. This memento here pays tribute to the centennial celebration, which took part in the 100 years, 1999, marked 100 years. Idora, pony ride, as you see here, is auctioned off to a couple. Well deserved. They deserved it. They paid $385,000 for it and took it piece by piece. They had it shipped back to Brooklyn, and Jane's dream was about to become a reality. But it took her 27 years of hard work restoring the great pieces. As you see here, she's working on one of the horses, and here it is. The ribbon cutting ceremony, the grand entrance to Jane's carousel, formerly the Idora Park Carousel. It sits at the river's front with the Brooklyn Bridge in the background, staring at it, if you will. Until we meet again. There it is at night. As you see it there, the carousel looks like it's in a jewelry box or a music box, if you will. Most definitely grand. An architect out of France, gentleman, his name escapes me now, he designed that building. It's made of acrylic versus glass. I will always adore Idora myself. I'm Joseph Napier Sr. I thank you for allowing me to share some of my childhood memories of Idora Park and how it came into existence, from Terminal Park to Idora Park to being in the history books, if you will. Idora, memories of it. You may have your own memories of Idora. I definitely have memories too. Idora was a grand place. It would take me 4 hours to talk about it. Numerous rides and festivities and FERRIS took place on the grounds of Idora through the years. It had a 102-year presence, if you will. But for people that went there through the generations, the memory will live on forever. A tribute to Jane. There again for 27 years of labor as she worked on that carousel diligently. It looks brand new. If you're ever in Brooklyn, go check it out. It's a grand, grand structure. She made it look brand new. Alan and Roxy Harris were my foster parents that raised me. They took me to Idora Park for the first time, and I would go for many years into its ultimate closing. I thank you for coming along with me, everybody. This has been a Napier Vision production, a NAPE 1962 film. Thank you.